to Academy Live. Are your financial statements set up for success? Today, we're breaking down best practices for organizing your financial data to align with industry standards. We are excited to have Chris Brown back on our show to talk all about it. But before we bring him on, I want to show you this video from our friends Matt and Dom all about guided growth. We'll be talking a lot more about this year, so let's see a quick introduction.
To understand what guided growth is, you first have to understand the changes that are happening in our world. We've gone from almost no security events affecting small to mid-sized business in the same way that we see today to it being an everyday occurrence.
Guided growth is really built to pull you through a journey that starts where you are and meets you at a place where you can get the right training, choose the right products, and build mature operations.
You can understand how to protect yourself and your clients, but how to actually go through it, how to sell it, how to price it, how to structure it, how to support it, how to be able to deal with it operationally. Guided Growth is a program that is meant to help you as an MSP walk through those challenges. The first step is really to get in and get an assessment. Try to figure out where you are in that journey, and then start taking those custom courses that come from that are the tracks that help you succeed as an entity.
In the Pax8 Academy, we have 3 separate tracks to help you get started on your cybersecurity journey. We've got a track for sales and marketing professionals, for owners and practitioners, and for those who will actually run a security practice within their MSP. Start where it makes sense for you, and you can start working through all the tracks as they make sense. Your credibility is on the line when you offer technology, and we at Pax8 are here to ensure you're offering secure technology that makes your customers successful.
Well, I'm really excited to learn more all about guided growth this year, and security guided growth tracks are going to be so helpful for you no matter what role you have at the MSP or at your business to learn more about security and to learn more about the vendors that can help you take these best practices to market. So, we're going to learn more about that later on. But for now, let's bring on Rex, Chris, and our other guest, Chris.
Hey,
Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show. Please tell everyone who you are and what you do.
hey, thanks a lot for having me back again. Chris Brown, executive coach here at the Pax8 Academy. I focus on 3 main areas, finance coaching, value creation coaching, and also general operations coaching. So I do stay away from the sales stuff. I'm going to leave that to Keith and Jeff and Jeremy and all those other guys. But those are our 3 main areas.
Excellent.
Very cool. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us. I know I've always enjoyed being around you. I've always learned so much. It's just impressive, your experience and how you kind of help our partners based on your experience and how much you know. So looking forward to hearing more. Rex, any comments about Chris Brown being back?
Well, here's a cool fun fact. 2009, when I was in that HTG, now the ConnectWise Evolve community peer group, Chris was one of the other members when he was running the MSP. And he and I did a lot of study in the service leadership index, benchmark report books together. So I'm excited that he's going to be on the show today, bringing in close to 20, almost 30 years of real knowledge using this stuff. So sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, thanks for that. That, I remember back to the very early days of service leadership. Remember when we'd pour around, it would be printed on 8 or 11 by 17 color paper, and we'd sit around and spread that stuff all over the tables and look at that data. So now it's a different approach now, but still the same data and still the same insights. So we were talking, it was Todd, Shirley, and Bessie and I, about how we were kind of missing a gap between what people were doing with their finances and what they're ultimately getting out of them. We've got some good courses that are led by instructors like Adam Hanneman on getting your finances in order. And we talk a lot in coaching about financial metrics and organization, but there was really this gap. And so Todd and Bessie and I started talking about what can we do to maybe help people bridge that gap a little bit. and give them some insights and start them down the path. It's not going to be a all-encompassing answers from A to Z, but I think it's a great stepping stone to get going in the right direction. And Rex, like we did back in the early days, right? Sometimes we just needed a little point in the right direction, and the shades opened a little bit, and we go, oh, that's how that would work. So
yeah, the problem is that always created a whole bunch of new questions that we had to go search for answers for.
yeah, absolutely. So with that, we can bring up the slide. I brought a little slide deck with me today. We're going to talk about, we decided to call this course, it's instructor-led training, called Organizing Your Financial Data. And really what we're trying to do is, like I already mentioned, repeating myself, but bridge the gap from, you've got some structure around your data, and you're categorizing things somewhat all right, but now what do you do with it? So if you can go to the next slide, I've got a question for you guys. So thinking about not service metrics or not operations KPIs, what do you suppose the single most important financial metric is for a managed services provider, technical services provider? And I'd like to ask the group what your thoughts are, because I've got my own, and I don't know if I'm just off in right field on this or not, but we'll see what the rest of you guys say.
Well,
I'm
I
feeling
can
like
say
I should have read the deck a little closer.
Yeah. Well, I know from experience that it's not whether or not you have money in your bank account, or worse, that you have checks in your checkbook. That's not the most important metric. I would guess really kind of around profitability.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's what I was thinking too, Chris, because I was thinking not all revenue is good revenue. We know that kind of as a phrase that's thrown around sometimes, that it's, not all about cash in. I think knowing that is important, but what is, the profitability around it? Rex, do you have an idea?
Yeah, the phrase "revenues for vanity, profits for sanity" came to mind. So, and what I'm not sure is if you're going with EBITDA, the bottom line, net profit, or gross margin. I'm unsure which one to pick there.
All right. So this is a Chris Brownism. My thing, I don't want to say harp on, but I repeat often. Maybe some people get tired of me saying it. Is I think the single most important metric in a services provider is services gross margin, because everything starts there. Like you just said, revenue is for vanity, kind of like, drive for show and putt for dough. We could have tons of revenue, but if we don't have any gross margin, we can't fund all the other operations of the company, sales, administration, pay our rent, things like that. So, we're talking about most of the partners of Pax8 are services providers. I mean, there are some companies that spend a lot of their revenue focus on product resale, but most of the partners are services providers. So instead of just gross margin being the most important metric, it's services gross margin. And so if we can go to the next slide a little bit, I just wanted to just bring this up a little bit, and this comes from our friends at Service Leadership. Best in class is defined as the top performing service providers. And so when we look at managed service providers specifically, this is how managed service providers are doing. They're getting 41.8%, 42% overall gross margin, 26 on hardware, 28, almost 30% on cloud services, and that's blending the Microsoft cloud along with all the other types of cloud services. And then our managed services, almost 50%. And so when you compare that to the industry average, you're looking at the overall as like 28% hardware, the industry. So this is all industry, good, bad, poor. They're getting about 16% on hardware. They do pretty good on cloud, and not so good on services at 41%. So if we could flip to the next slide.
Actually, Chris, if I can chime in real quick on that. It took me a little while to come to terms with the fact that this is the bottom of the top quartile. right? So
Yes.
like I always wanted to beat these and be better than these to be firmly in the best in class area.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, this is when we think about, we call it quartiles, right? The bottom 25%, the two middle 25%, and then the top 25%. Like Rex said, this is the kind of the barrier to entry to get into that area. So there's people that are doing much better than these numbers also. So when we think
Yep.
about, that's not like the ultimate target to shoot for, that's like the barrier to entry. So now we can go on to the next slide. So when we were thinking about that, I was thinking, well, okay, we've got, we have service leadership as one of our partners, and we do benchmarking with them, and we've got all these ideas. But how do we really get there? How do we get from, we've got some structure in our finances, we understand how things work, and how do we translate that to start being able to walk that path to get to best in class? And so when we started designing this course, we really laid it out like we're looking at on the slide deck there. We're going to talk about lines of business and why they're important. And I'm going to touch on that just a little bit today. We're going to spend a couple weeks around the chart of accounts and lining it up. Now, we already do some of this in some of our other courses, but this is going to be a little bit more about the whys things are, the buckets the way they are, and what actually goes into them. Often there's some I don't want to say error, but there's some misunderstanding about how we categorize things, because when we actually start producing metrics and and getting data out the back end of the system, we want to be able to compare to industry standards, not kind of our own made up standards. And then one of the things that I know is near and dear to Rex's heart is talking about labor allocation and analysis. Again, I think about services gross margin being, the most important metric for a services provider, and and the cost of services is the biggest part of that cost of services is the labor. And so are we making sure that we're allocating it properly, getting it into the right areas so we can do the proper analysis? We're not um, leaving anything out of the pie per se. So before we go on, you guys have any questions on what the course agenda is going to look like?
Well, I do kind of have a question from your experience, because I love, deep diving into chart of accounts, because I remember, one of the very first courses, MSP Foundations, where we kind of started out, we looked a lot. And my question to you is, particularly in chart of accounts, what are some of the most common mistakes you see MSPs making in setting up their chart of accounts?
Yeah, probably the biggest mistake I see is the blending of, and it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? The cloud services, the products we, buy from Pax8 and resell, because they have the word services on them, most often they get lumped in with our managed services, and it can really skew the numbers and how things look.
Mhm.
Potentially either good or bad, most often bad. So we really need to get that. That's really a product resale motion. We need to get that into the right area so we can really start to understand what does our services operation really look like.
Yeah,
Good.
I think the
Yeah.
confusion is recurring revenue. Oh, that's managed services, but the cloud resale is not. It's recurring revenue, but it's not managed services.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things I don't know if maybe one of our other coaches, Scott Hamlin, who's been on the show, he might have said, he says it constantly is now I'm probably going to get it wrong, right? But all all cloud is recurring revenue, but not all recurring revenue is managed services, or something along those lines, right? So, all right. If we can jump back into the deck a little bit, I'll just kind of go over kind of what we're going to talk about. And when we talk about, we're going to, in the early parts of the course, we're going to talk about lines of business and segmenting these out. And you can see that we have quite a few different services areas. And again, we've got our product resale as part of that. So really understanding, how each of these services units is doing is very important to understanding the overall profitability and margin of the company. Those two at the bottom, we'll spend a little bit of time on the course, but most partners do not do app dev anymore, or very little of it. And shared infrastructure used to be a thing back in the day when Rex and I were first kicking around in the peer groups, where people would buy a lot of hardware and on their own nickel, their own capital, and put it in their own data center. So we're really going to be looking at the three different main types of services there underneath product resale. We can go to the next slide. And so when we think about those lines of business, then we're going to help people align them with their chart of accounts. And so, we just touched on getting product into one bucket and getting our managed services and our cloud broken apart. And we really want to do this for the ability to properly measure margin and figure out, so we can compare, like we talked earlier about best in class measurements with service leadership. We can get the data into the right buckets, so then we can say, yep, we're hitting the mark, we're just getting that barrier to entry, getting into best in class, or no, we have a lot of work to do. And then another part of this is the understanding what is a cost of goods sold and what is really an expense. And that's also something that we've seen confused over time. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but a lot of times I'll see rent being put as a cost of good, or when somebody spends admin time, they put that into admin expenses. You guys have any other thoughts on how people miscategorize expenses?
Yeah, I think that's a great one to flag. I think in the lack of understanding, I think most commonly I see kind of early on where I see more of the labor going in as an expense, not as a cost of goods sold, and I think back to kind of why you're doing this, it's like the impact that these have on your decisions is huge. And as you kind of, start to develop your business and get some acumen and kind of mature your operations, these things about understanding finance have a huge impact. And things like that, where it's like, well, what does it matter? It just goes to the bottom line. But if you don't understand the impact of the cost of your labor to a managed service agreement, you can't make the right decision on, do you hire, we feel busy, do we need more people, or is it okay, our service gross margin is hitting that number where we're at risk one way or the other. So lots of thoughts, Chris. I don't want to take away
Yeah.
from your presentation, but I think, to me, I love kind of the why behind it. Like, that visibility leads to better decisions in your business.
Chris, I think you nailed that. The visibility is the thing. I could probably spend the entire show on a soapbox about how CPAs or bookkeepers, they're just focused on getting the taxes right. They're not focused on creating the visibility so you can make business decisions. And almost every partner that we start with, they've got all of the labor down in expenses, and we have to explain, hey, when you buy a network switch for $800 and sell it for $1,000, the switch is cost of goods sold. They know that, right? But labor, when you're selling services, the person who delivers that service is a cost of goods sold, and it's a struggle to get even the bookkeeper or CPA to understand that that's important to you as a business leader.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Chris, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I think that's like the common mistake, or what's overlooked, and getting that understanding. I thought you were going to say, when I was asking about the biggest thing within chart of accounts, was the overuse of the MISC category. The the over generous allocation of funds to the miscellaneous, or not aligning revenue with expenses, or a COGS, kind of having them just mix match. You can go into a lot of these, but I remember, in the first iterations of some of our training and some of our courses, those are some of the things we highlighted because we just saw it so much. So I love how you have this outlined and organized, I think, in a much clearer way. So I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, I think it will be too for partners to be able to kind of connect the dots a little bit. And if we go back to the slide deck again, the next thing is, you go to the next slide, is the labor allocation we were talking about. And I think you guys are exactly right. Um, Accountants, CPAs, they're really just worried about tax. So they, going to try to figure out the depreciation and where they can maybe move some things around, expense things to create less tax liability, and that's the end of it. They're really not concerned about how we're doing on margin and some of those things. And so, one of the other common themes that I've seen over the years is the lack of allocation or improper allocation on labor. And so somebody says, yeah, I'm doing really good on services gross margin, I'm making 54%, better than best in class, but we just can't seem to make any money. And start looking at it, well, yeah, they haven't allocated any of their labor to the right buckets, right? Maybe they got two technicians up there, and so of course the gross margin looks good. Or I've even seen it recently where there is no labor in cost of goods, and so their margin just looks fantastic. And
Oh, it's brilliant.
It's brilliant
That
until
reminds
you fix it.
it. It reminds me of that whole thing of, we're only losing $2 per unit, but we're going to make it up in volume.
Right.
I think just
Right.
so
Yeah.
Chris, when you're going through, like, I mean, you talk about the most common mistakes. What do you see as the, like, prioritization? Like, is there such a way to kind of say, okay, what are the most important things to look at first, where you're going to really kind of get the benefit of putting the time into setting these up right, or is it a little bit more holistic than that?
No, I think there is some prioritization to, again, this is my criticism. I think services gross margin is most important. So let's focus on that first. Let's make sure we're getting pure services revenue against pure services costs and try to figure that out. And then once we get that working good, let's move on to product resale. Usually that's fixed, right? Either at the time you quote it or at the time you sell it on an agreement. You've set your margin. It's not really anything you can do about it. And then after we get all, kind of the gross margin areas working really well, then let's start to look at, okay, are our sales and marketing expenses aligned properly? How do those compare? How do our industry, the rest of our expenses compare? So we kind of work our way from the top down, actually. So
Makes a lot of
one
sense.
other thought on the labor allocation piece too is the just being able to go back and bring in all of the people and talk about, try to get the partners to understand it's not just the technicians, engineers that are part of our cost of service delivery, but it's also the account managers, it's the dispatchers, it's service managers, and service administration, and all those things, and understanding the why behind it, so they can do the comparisons and calculations on their own. So that's the basic four parts of the course we're going to talk about. I think Bessie and I have talked just briefly about maybe someday there'll be a second version of this, so we can start to get deeper dive for the partners that want to do that. But yeah, if we could pull back out of the slide deck again, I think the thing that I always, another thing I say to people, and maybe they think I say it too much, is I've never seen a partner, a services provider that had the problem of wildly increasing gross margin. Just month over month, the services gross margin just goes up wildly, and we don't know what to do about it. And there's just more and more money. There's something always conspiring against gross margin. There's always something chipping away at it. And so, if we have our financial data lined up right, and we understand the whys, we can easily start to be able to go, okay, I need to turn this valve or tighten this screw, and be able to make meaningful change as to trying to shotgun it. So
Mm-hmm.
Chris, can we talk a little bit about like the way we change the way we do things as the maturity increases? Just in general, I think the phrase "it's not where you are when you start. It's that you start where you are, right, is really important, because the more you try to report on and understand the information that you're seeing, the more questions it causes you to ask. And then that causes you to go work on something operational so you can get better clarity in the information. Do you have any thoughts on kind of where I'm going there?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I always think about is let's we're going to talk about these different lines of lines of business, but let's focus on, can we just get services gross bound, all of our services of all different kinds against all of our costs. Okay, now we start improving that and making changes on that. Okay, now it's still not where we want it to be. Okay, now maybe let's go in and dive in and figure out what are the different types, technical, professional, and managed, and where our weak spots, and keep honing in on that. Same thing with product. We may say, yeah, it's about where we want it to be. Let's focus on another area, and we come back and say, no, this isn't where we want it to be. This hardware is, we're quoting it at 25 points of margin, and we want it to be 30. And what's the problem? And let's adjust and fix that. So it's iterative, right? Look at the big areas we can most impact change right away, and then keep dialing in as you keep getting better and better.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to remind everybody, the more clarity we're looking for so we can improve the business decisions that we're making, that involves making operational change. And like we always say, when you make operational change, you temporarily lower employee satisfaction. And the way we mitigate that is by using the 5 phases: understand the best practice, document the way we do business, train your team, implement the new process or procedure, and then inspect what we expect are people following that process and procedure. And if we follow those 5 phases, we don't lower employee satisfaction as much, right? But I found it's that seeking more clarity and accuracy in the information and the data is what triggers a lot of this operational improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree more.
Well, I'm very excited for your instructor-led training to start. It starts on May 9th. You can take it with, if you have a subscription. So there's links in the chat for how to learn all about you can take a look at the syllabus for this course, and they'll show you how to register. You'll have all the details about what will be covered. So take a look at that in the description. There's also some free on-demand courses as well that are related to this topic that you might find interesting. So thank you so much, Chris, for being a guest on our show. Next up is Sales Pitch with Keith Marciano. So let's take a look.
It's tax season again. Look, reality is none of us like paying taxes. It's just one of those things that we have to deal with, especially when owning a business. In coaching my baseball players, I would help them build muscle memory on cutting back their swing. Overswinging usually meant weak contact when hitting the ball or missing it altogether and striking out. I would teach my players that minimizing their swing meant maximizing their results. As business owners, we want to maximize tax deductions while boosting sales. Let's touch all the bases on how businesses can save money on taxes while simultaneously increasing their sales. 1. Invest in marketing. Use tax savings to invest in marketing campaigns that target new clients and retain existing ones. Marketing expenses are often tax deductible, and you can combine this with marketing development funds from your best vendors. 2. Referral programs. Incentivizing existing clients to refer new ones with freebies like a free conference room setup or free employee security training for 6 months. This will help increase your client base and is deductible. 3. Training and development. Enroll yourself and salespeople into Pax8 sales coaching. Training programs that enhance your team's skills, leading to better sales performance. 4. Client loyalty programs. Enhance retention by treating clients to lunch or sending them a gift at their anniversary of doing business with you. This not only builds retention, but can also be a deductible marketing expense. By strategically leveraging tax deductions and reinvesting those savings into sales incentives, businesses can effectively reduce their tax burden while driving growth. This approach not only improves financial health, but also fosters a competitive edge in your market. Now, go talk to your accountant about cutting back your tax swing to make solid contact with your sales efforts.
Now, don't forget to get your taxes done. So, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check us out on April 22nd. Our guest will be Zach Paulson. And if you wanted to see any of the materials we talked about today, like the syllabus for Chris's new course, check it out in our YouTube description. It's underneath links right below us. Remember, we're live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and on demand always. So, don't forget to subscribe and like us on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye.